Hello, everyone. Welcome to Oceania University of Medicine's webinar for future Canadian doctors. Very nice to see all of you. If you would take a moment to introduce yourself by typing your name and where you're from in the Q&A box, that would be wonderful. And then I'll also know that you're able to use the Q&A box if you have any questions. So please go ahead when you're ready by just typing your name and where you're joining us from in the Q&A. So hi, Annalisa from California. Hi, Greg and Gozi and Ravi and Rowena and Sylvia and Wale. Hi to anyone joining us via recording. So nice to see some new faces as well as some individuals that I've met in the past in previous webinars. So hi to Ravi from Vancouver and Gozi from California. Really nice to have you all here. So if you haven't come to an OUM webinar before, you might not recognize me. So I'm Associate Professor Nicolette McGuire, and I'm OUM's Associate Dean for Student Engagement. So any webinar that you come to learn a bit more about the university, I will be there. When you join the university and you start your orientation week, I will be there. When you begin your medical sciences, when you go through your clinical transition unit, when you're there for your clinical years, when you graduate, I will be there. So I'm very pleased to make your acquaintance now and to be able to talk with you a little bit more about OUM and supports for Canadian doctors. So I haven't said so in previous webinars, or maybe I have, but I actually am here in Canada. So I'm joining all of you from Anishinaabe territory in rural tiny Ontario. If anyone else is from Ontario, shout out to you. Tiny is in fact a tiny community in Ontario, about an hour and a half north of Toronto. And I've been with OUM for about 11 years now. I used to work from rural East Souk in British Columbia, so I have a good understanding of those two systems, as well as supports for students who are in other provinces as well. So I want to tell you a little bit about the history and context for OUM and why we're here to support you as future Canadian doctors or future US doctors interested in practicing in Canada, or future Australian doctors perhaps interested in practicing in Canada. So on the left here, we have Ms. Taffy Gould, who is OUM's founder and chairman. She's also a former educator and a philanthropist as well. And Ms. Gould, or lovingly Taffy, had a drive and had an understanding about a global disparity in the training for doctors throughout many countries in the world. And the Prime Minister for Samoa at the time, the Honorable Susuga Tu'ilaepa Sailele Maliego, heard about this philanthropic goal that Taffy had around being able to support clinicians and the training of clinicians in areas of most need. So way back in 2000, she had this idea where we could have preclinical studies for future doctors online and have the clinical years be all in person. And this was a pretty radical idea at the time, but the Honorable Maliego was on board for this and saw a real opportunity for Samoans. And the Oceania University of Medicine Act was signed in 2002 as an effort to support the physician shortage in Samoa, but also in other areas of the South Pacific. Since then, OUM's been building up its supports for students in many other countries where there is a physician shortage. So there's a new Prime Minister now, the Honorable Afioga Fiame Naomi Mata'afa, and she's had a lot of discussions with us about the support that we've provided to Samoa, and also now that Samoa is providing the rest of the world through OUM, and specifically addressing doctor shortages outside Samoa, including in Australia and New Zealand, as well as in the United States and now Canada as well. So the university really has a history in supporting countries that have a physician shortage and ensuring that there are alternative methods for allowing for more individuals to enter the medical profession who are qualified and talented, and who also fit the learning model that we have here at OUM. So I'm sure that you've had a chance to discuss with your admissions counselor in a little bit more in detail some of the model of how OUM works in terms of our preclinical and clinical curriculum, but it does have this well-established mode of having preclinical education that's conducted in virtual classrooms and is complemented by both recorded as well as in-person live sessions that are both workshop-based, case study-based, problem-based type learnings, as well as clinical skills. Some clinical skills that are able to be taught virtually, and then we do have in-person components as well in the clinical years. So that's a little bit about the history of OUM and how we got started, and also about why we're interested in supporting students in Canada. So all of you who are from Canada know that there is across all of the provinces and territories in Canada, there are more positions for doctors than there are trained individuals to fill those positions, particularly in rural and remote areas, but in many urban areas as well. And so we have a real opportunity at OUM to be able to support students who are willing and motivated and talented to fill those gaps. And that's each of you in the room today. So if you have questions as I go through, I've been given some frequently asked questions from our admissions team to cover for those of you who are interested about how OUM is training future Canadian doctors. But if you have additional questions that I'm not answering, or just anything that pops into your mind, just go ahead and pop your question into the Q&A box, and I'll be happy to answer it here live. So you might think, well, if OUM is like a quote unquote online school, do you ever get to see anybody in person? So it's a myth that you're just going to be sitting all by yourself for all 4 years of study. We do have meetups. There are student organized as well as university organized events where you can meet each other in person. And of course, your clinical years are all done in person on hospital and other clinical sites. So this is our most recent student event. This took place in Brisbane at the end of May. So you can see me here chatting with a few students at coffee hour. Here's the students whose backs are turned in this session. So we have a couple of students here from Australia and New Zealand. And here in the background is our Chief Operating Officer, Ms. Carmel Singh. The photo that I showed of Taffy Gould on the first page is an exercise called Explain the Clinical Condition to Your Grandmother. So our student Corinne Modise here is trying to explain the condition that our founder and chairman is acting out to her as if she were that individual's grandmother. So, and Corinne actually won this exercise at the student conference. So I thought I would give a shout out to her for that. Carolyn Esho is actually a Canadian student, but is studying in Australia, so was able to come to the conference. And here are graduates that were able to attend this particular conference. So there's 9 lovely individuals who graduated in this most recent cohort, and you can see them here with the Dean for Australia, our founder and chairman, and our Vice Chancellor, along with Wila's daughter here, accepting a diploma along with her. This is after the graduation ceremony. So we do have a North American meetup coming up in Houston at the end of October. And if you are interested in coming and meeting with some students or and faculty and administrators in person, your admissions counselor can give you a little bit more information about the student meetup happening in October. So some frequently asked questions that admissions counselors are receiving from inquiries from our Canadian students is about where will I do my clinical rotations and can I complete them in Canada? And just a reminder, if you have questions, you're welcome that are other than what I've gotten from our admissions counselors, you're welcome to type those into the Q&A box. So in terms of where you will do your clinical rotations, OUM has dedicated sites in all of the jurisdictions that it serves. So there are dedicated sites in Australia and in New Zealand, in Samoa, as well as in North America. Our current North American site is in Chicago. So when you get to your clinical rotations, you can complete all of your clinical rotations in Chicago. Our North American team also does accept when students wish to do clinical rotations at specific sites where they have an existing relationship or where they've sought a relationship during their preclinical years. We do create agreements for clinical rotations at additional sites, as well as our Chicago site. Can you complete them in Canada? So we don't currently have dedicated sites within Canada other than those that our students are creating with them with existing relationships that they have, and we are ready and able to do that for you. If you have a particular site that you are interested in working with, we can work with you to create agreements with that site. And we're also working with a couple of organizations in Ontario and British Columbia to explore further whether we can have some dedicated sites within Canada as well. But I can't give further information on that at this point because we don't currently have those sites. So there are dedicated clinical rotations in North America, in Chicago, and we're open to developing more clinical rotation sites at your request once you become a student. Okay, so will you need to travel to Samoa? I think the question is, do I get to travel to Samoa? Which is absolutely yes. So all students at OUM is a Samoan medical university. So all students who are medical students at OUM complete a 4-week elective rotation at Tupua Tamasese Meole Hospital, which is here in beautiful Apia, Samoa. So here's the blue hole in Samoa as well. So students really rave and have a wonderful experience when they go to Samoa. The people are very welcoming. We have a dedicated site at the hospital with administrative staff that are there to support you in your journey towards getting to Samoa and getting you acquainted into the hospital, into the surrounding area. Once you arrive for your rotation, and students have an amazing clinical experience there. We have students that have been able to deliver babies, to scrub into surgeries, to be a part of diagnostic teams where they wouldn't otherwise have that opportunity were they rotating at our sites in North America or Australia specifically. So all students do need to complete a 4-week elective rotation in Samoa as part of the coursework at OUM, and that's undertaken in the clinical years. Okay, this is a good question. Am I eligible to practice in Canada with an OUM degree? So absolutely, you are able to practice in Canada with an OUM degree, but it's not, you can't just get a piece of paper and you're ready to practice medicine. You're eligible to practice medicine in Canada with an OUM degree, but you have to meet the licensure requirements to be able to practice in Canada post-residency. So if you're not familiar with those, I'll give you a little bit of an overview, but I really encourage you, if you're not sure about the licensure requirements in Canada, to have a closer look yourself and make sure that you have a good understanding of that. I see we have a couple of questions or hands raised. So I'm just going to ask Sylvia, I see your hand is raised. Would you like to take the microphone and ask a question? Okay, perhaps that was an error. So I'm going to turn off your mic, Sylvia, to make sure we don't have any background noise. But if you would like to take the microphone after, that's completely fine too.
Sorry, that wasn't me.
Okay, and hi to Sunyi as well. I see you've joined us also. So in terms of becoming licensed in Canada, you should go to the Licentiate of the Medical Council of Canada website to learn more about licensing requirements of the MCC. So I've pulled one piece of information from there, and we have a good understanding about the fact that OUM allows for eligibility to practice in medicine, but you should also ensure that any medical school that you're applying to, if you're planning to become licensed in Canada, that you feel confident that you'll meet all the requirements. So the MCC requires that individuals who are going to become licensed are graduates from a medical school that's listed in the World Directory of Medical Schools, and it should include a sponsor note indicating that's an acceptable medical school in Canada. So if you go to the World Directory of Medical Schools, you can search for Oceania University of Medicine. It'll give you the school details and the contact information as well as the program details. And then you want to select the sponsor notes to make sure that it's going to fit this particular requirement, including the sponsor note indicating that it's acceptable. So you can see there's information here about Canada and about ECFMG. And so the World Directory of Medical Schools lets you know that medical degrees obtained from this medical school are acceptable to the provincial and territorial medical regulatory authorities in Canada and acceptable to all medical organizations in Canada. So a degree from OUM does give you eligibility in meeting the requirement 1. The second requirement is that you have to have a pass on the MCC QE Part 1. This is true for all medical graduates within Canada. You have to pass the MCC QE. Individuals who are graduates of foreign medical schools, who are what we call IMGs, International Medical Graduates, also need to pass the NAC, which is an objective structured clinical exam in addition to the MCC QE. And OUM's program is preparatory for both the MCC QE and the NAC. In fact, you'll take the OUM final OSCE a few months before you would take the NAC. The third one, successfully completed your 12 months of clinical postgraduate medical training. So that happens after your graduation of OUM. So after you complete your 12 months of residency, you're eligible to become a licentiate. Have the required medical credentials, including the verification of postgraduate training verified through MCC. So your residency has to be verified. And then you have to pay the LMCC application fee. So for the ones that happen prior to graduation, obtaining your degree from OUM and passing your board examinations, you'll be prepared to do that with the program and with your degree from OUM. So if you're interested in becoming licensed in Canada, you'll have the requirements in place for your medical degree to be able to do that. There's a question from someone who's anonymous, and welcome. It sounded like you said the clinical rotation in Samoa was not optional. It was explained to me that there would be options to make arrangements for the 4 weeks where we are. Is that incorrect? So you do not have to do all of your rotations in Samoa, but everyone needs to complete one 4-week rotation in Samoa during their clinical rotation years and prior to graduation. And then there was also a question about, are there graduation ceremonies at US sites or exclusively in Samoa? So the graduation ceremony that I showed you on that earlier slide was one in Brisbane. We have a graduation ceremony coming up in October in Houston in the United States, and we don't have the location set for where the in-person events will happen in 2024, but we'll keep you posted if you're interested to know. So the next North American graduation will be in October of this year. Okay, can you get a residency and practice in your province? So what I will tell you is that no medical degree from anywhere in the world or any school in the world will guarantee that you get a residency, nor will it guarantee that you'll get to practice in your province. But can you get a residency? Are you eligible for a residency? Absolutely. Are you eligible to practice in your province? Absolutely. So let me show you what I mean. So you'll want to, if you're interested in becoming matched to residency in Canada, you'll want to go to the CARMS website. And there are, if there's information in there about graduates from Canadian medical schools, as well as US medical schools, as well as international medical graduates. So each province and territory has different requirements and positions available that may be dedicated for IMG students or not. So in all of the provinces and territories, international medical graduates are eligible to apply for a residency match in the R1 match in the first iteration. In some provinces, there are a separate stream of positions that are specifically for IMGs. So for example, if you are a resident of British Columbia and you're seeking a residency in British Columbia, there's a parallel stream where IMGs apply to positions that are specific for IMGs in British Columbia. So there are a set of positions that are specifically defined for IMGs in a few different disciplines. It's the same here in Ontario. There are parallel positions. In Quebec, IMGs apply to the same positions as all Canadian graduates. So there are not dedicated positions for international medical graduates in Quebec. Something that I will say in terms of, are you eligible for residency and can you practice in your province? If you happen to be a resident of Quebec or of New Brunswick, the Oceania University of Medicine curriculum is exclusively in English. So we don't offer any French curriculum or any French parallel curriculum. So if you wish to gain residency in Quebec or in New Brunswick, you would be less competitive in not having a French language education. So you'd want to, if you're interested in those areas, you want to be satisfied for yourself that there would be positions available to individuals who are taking programs that are exclusively offered in the English language. For the other provinces, there's also a return of service agreement. So when you take a residency, particularly if it's in the parallel track where you're taking a position that's specific to an IMG resident, you sign a return of service agreement, which basically states the number of years that you'll complete that residency and remain in that location. IMGs in every province are also able to apply for the second iteration if they don't match in the R1 match. And most provinces will have the competitive stream where all the positions in the second iteration, there's not ones that are defined for IMGs in most provinces, unless you happen to be in Alberta or Manitoba, where you can apply in the second iteration to both the parallel stream where there's positions just for IMGs, as well as into the competitive stream. And for the second iteration in the parallel or competitive stream, it will depend on whether there's a return of service agreement or not, depending on the type of position that is taken. And then in terms of unrestricted or restricted licensure, the graduates that take those positions, those residencies that are offered in either the first or second match, so they complete them successfully, then they are eligible for licensure with the LMCC. So depending on the province in which you happen to reside or the province in which you hope to practice in the future, the requirements can be slightly different. So I encourage you to go onto the CARMS site. They'll even have links to some specifics that are published by each province about what their requirements are and how to, for example, submit the appropriate documentation or any types of programs that are available to support IMGs in those provinces. it's kind of interesting that in Canada, we have dedicated positions for international medical graduates. And this really speaks to the fact that we have a physician shortage in Canada, and that we create positions specifically to bring in individuals that are trained in foreign institutions, because we don't have enough positions available in Canadian medical schools to train all of the doctors that we need for the open residency positions that are available in Canada. A question coming in from the chat window: does the school accept international wires, or do they only accept electronic funds transfers, auto withdrawal? I'd like to avoid the 2.7% convenience fee that's attached to using a credit card. So I do want to let you know that if you don't know already, that the tuition and fees are all charged in Canadian dollars, and so you won't receive additional fees for conversion, and you will the tuition and fees, you'll know that it will always be in Canadian dollars, so it won't fluctuate with particular exchange rates. We do accept transfers through our rippling system. There are convenience fees associated with not paying your fees in full. So some students are on a annual plan, so they'll pay their annual tuition. Others are on a semester plan, so they pay their tuition semesterly, twice a year, and then others are on a monthly payment plan. So there is a convenience fee associated with the administration of a monthly plan. In terms of the fees charged by your credit card company, what you should do is get in touch with the admissions counselor and see if you can get some information specifically about your company. But within the payment system, there isn't a specific fee attached to different modes of payment. Okay. So do we have financial aid for Canadian students, and do we offer loans? So we do not offer loans, not just for Canadian students, but we don't offer in-house loans to any students in any of the jurisdictions that we serve, which is Australia, New Zealand, Samoa, United States, and Canada. So we don't have loans. We ourselves do not offer financial aid for Canadian students. If you are a Canadian student and you've done your undergraduate degree in Canada, you'll know that there is the system of financial aid is both provincial as well as federal, and so but is administered by each provincial authority. So for example, if you live in British Columbia, whether you're going to a school in British Columbia or in Saskatchewan or in Samoa, you apply for funding through Student Aid BC, for example. So each provincial and territorial funding organization will administer their own provincial student aid, as well as would administer the Canadian portion of Canadian student loans. OUM is currently working with our current students who live in particular territories and provinces, because all of the approvals for financial aid for Canadian students from provinces is all student-led. So the students submit a form, and then we fill out a portion of that form that provides further information about the universities, so that Student Aid BC or Ontario Student Assistance Program have the appropriate information to determine whether that student is eligible, both based on their financial need as well as on the program. So if you are a Canadian and you are applying into the next intake at OUM, I would encourage you to begin going on to your province's financial aid website and seeing what the forms and process is for filling out, and you can get that process started and send us the portion that we need to complete for your particular province. So we're happy to support you through that process. We can't guarantee that anyone or everyone will get financial aid from their province, because we don't make those decisions, but we do have administrative staff available to support applications for that. So please go ahead and get those into us if you're interested in applying for financial aid. Okay. There's another question about convenience fee. If you want to email me separately or email the information to your admissions counselor, we can look into that for you. I can't answer questions about specific fees on specific student accounts. All right. So do I have to take the USMLE pathway or take the USMLE, which stands for the US Medical Licensure Exam? And can I work in the US after graduation if I decide to move there? So USMLE, there are 3 steps in the pathway, 3 tests in the pathway. Step 1 is taken in the transition between the end of your preclinical years and the start of your clinical rotations. Step 2 is taken at the end of your core clinical rotations, and step 3 is taken post-graduation. So all 3 steps are required for licensure in the US. So if you want to work in the United States after graduation, you need to ensure that you've completed all of the steps in the USMLE pathway, that is USMLE step 1, 2, and 3. Also, in order to complete rotations within the United States, you have to complete step 1. So for those of you who wish to do rotations in Chicago, you need to take the USMLE pathway. So we actually do encourage all of our students, no matter what jurisdiction that they are living and practicing in, to take the USMLE steps because it increases their competitiveness for a residency match. So our students, our program is preparatory for the USMLE steps. We have a USMLE step 1 prep program and a USMLE step 2 prep program that our students complete. After they complete their clinical rotations, they take what's called the NBME, the National Board of Medical Examiners, which is a practice exam prior to taking USMLE, and then they take their USMLE step 1 or step 2, and then they proceed to the next point in their clinical training. So it's actually best if you complete the USMLEs as you go through the appropriate steps in training. It's much more difficult if you decided later, after you'd graduated and maybe already been in residency, that you wanted to perhaps move to the US and that you didn't have those licensure requirements in place. So the program is already preparatory for USMLE. So it's advised that all individuals take the USMLE steps in order. And just a little bit of information about how that pathway works. So the preclinical phase includes our general principles course and 8 different organ systems. So students who started in our January intake this year are starting their 3rd system, urinary system, on Monday, and individuals who are part of our incoming July cohort will be starting with general principles on the 17th of July. After the completion of the preclinical courses, students take a preclinical exam, and then they will enter the USMLE Prep 1 course. So individuals will have a good amount of time for their preparation in that course. They complete lecturia, they complete practice exams. They're able to complete different sets of NBME exams. You can go on the National Board of Medical Examiners website. So the different sections of the USMLE, there are practice tests for each section, and then there's a full practice test for the entire USMLE. So that's all part of the Prep 1 program. And then students take the USMLE Step 1, and then they complete a clinical skills course before starting their clinical phase, where they have 56 weeks of core clinical rotations and 16 weeks of elective rotations. And typically students will undertake the USMLE Step 2 prep course at the completion of their core clinical rotations and take the USMLE Step 2. The end of the line is the objective structured clinical exam, which is preparatory for the NAC. The USMLE Step 1 and Step 2 prep courses also put you in pretty good stead, as well as the in addition to the preclinical phase and clinical phase, put you in pretty good stead for the MCC-QE1 and the NAC as well. So we really want to ensure that our students have access to all of the best courses as well as preparation materials to make them competitive for residency match in all the sites that we serve. And just to let you know that as of this month, there's 100% first-time pass rate for individuals who've taken USMLE Step 1 and Step 2 after completion of the prep courses. So it's highly recommended. And we place all students in North America on the USMLE track, unless there are certain extenuating circumstances that we need to consider. But it's really in the interest of ensuring that you have the best chance for gaining residency in multiple locations, hopefully, and have a good choice about where you'd like to complete your residency. Annalisa wants to know, what US states are OUM graduates working? Is there anyone in California? We do have graduates. We have students in California. We do have graduates that are from California. We have individuals in residency across multiple states in the US. I probably cannot name all of them here. California up until this year had an additional restriction around ECFMG, which is the Education Commission for Foreign Medical Graduates, as well as on the WFME, the World Federation for Medical Education, which has just recently been lifted. So we're working more to understand the policy around California and the implications for the changes to ECFMG and WFME. But there are individuals who are living, studying, and practicing within California and other states in the US. There's also Pennsylvania, Louisiana, Texas, Illinois, Indiana, Montana, so on and so forth. Okay, so if you want to know a little bit more about the match process for IMGs within the US, there's a great just video on the Match's website, which is the National Resident Matching Program. It's just called the Match in the US, and it can give you a little bit more information about what the steps are for IMGs and some recommendations if you're going through that. So you don't need to worry about matching at this point, but you'll just want to make sure that you're fully informed about what that process looks like and make sure that whatever decisions you make about medical school are ensuring that you're going to be competitive in CARMS and in the match as well. All right, do I have to take the MCAT? The answer is no, you do not have to take the MCAT. You also don't have to take the GAMSAT, which some individuals who are in jurisdictions that OUM serves would traditionally take the GAMSAT. So we don't require the MCAT. We don't require the GAMSAT. If you have taken the MCAT and want to submit your scores, we will absolutely accept them, but it is not an admissions requirement. We don't assess MCAT scores in our application and acceptance process. Unless you mention that in your interview, if there are specific components of your MCAT that you'd like us to have a closer look at. Otherwise, we don't use MCAT in our admissions decision. You don't need to take time and effort and money away from your goal of getting into medical school in order to take the MCAT, which can be a pretty lengthy process of preparation and have quite high fees. So we don't require MCAT for admission at OUM. So I'm just looking, making sure I've answered the questions in the Q&A box. Okay. Okay, am I able to have my tuition charged in Canadian dollars? So OUM tuition is charged in Canadian dollars. So the figures that you've talked with your admission counselor about the current tuition and fees for OUM is charged in Canadian dollars. That fee is within Canadian dollars. And then when you're charged for your payments, the charges are done in Canadian dollars. So you don't incur any additional fees with the currency conversion, and you're not, there's no kind of conversion of your dollars that will make your fees be any different than what your initial expectation was. So tuition at OUM is charged in Canadian dollars. The published tuition and fees will be in Canadian dollars for you if you live in Canada. So I know there are a few of you who are residents in the US. I'm not sure if you're Canadian citizens who are living in the US. Every individual at OUM, every student at OUM, you're charged in the currency of your country of residence. So if you are a US citizen living in the US, your tuition fees that are given to you by your admissions counselor and are published, those are in US dollars. If you are a Canadian citizen or Canadian resident living in Canada, your tuition and fees are charged in Canadian dollars. Angela wants to know, what if you are in Australia? If you are in Australia, your tuition and fees are in Australian dollars, and your tuition fees are charged to you in Australian dollars. I don't know if anyone's in New Zealand here. If you are a New Zealand resident, your tuition and fees are in New Zealand dollars, and they're charged to you in New Zealand dollars. Okay, so just a little bit of information about our students and our student support programs, since I'm our Associate Dean for Student Engagement. So if you look on the website, it'll say that we have 311 students enrolled, where that number is increasing as we get into our July intake, which starts on the 10th of July. So I think we've got 319 at the moment, students who are enrolled at OUM, and we have a student to faculty ratio of 10:1. And something that you might already know about, or I would encourage you to look a little bit more into the program details, is our academic advising program. So all students on admission are assigned an academic advisor. So they have an individual faculty member that they can meet with weekly. Typically, they talk about academic things like quizzes or topics that they don't particularly understand, but it can also be about study skills, or about navigating the program, or what your needs are for that week. So you're assigned an individual that basically becomes your go-to person, and is there to support you throughout your preclinical journey. Once you complete the general principles portion of the course, you also have a clinical mentor. So in addition to an academic advisor, you also have a clinician who you're connecting with on a regular basis to ensure that you have a good understanding of some of the clinical principles that you're covering in class. You get an opportunity to start to apply and think clinically about some of the knowledge that you're gaining and learning through having this relationship with a clinical mentor. So you have basically two individuals that are there to support you throughout your preclinical study, and your clinical mentor is there to support you throughout your entire journey at OUM. So OUM students come from 55 countries of origin. I think there are 53 different languages spoken by OUM students. Some individuals are bi and tri and even quadrilingual. All the students at OUM are resident in our 5 countries of service, though. Everyone's a resident either in Australia, New Zealand, Samoa, US, or Canada, although we have students who are resident in that area may not necessarily be citizens and may have different birth countries, and we're really proud of that diversity. We also have a really wide age range of students. So we have many students who are coming to join us right after their undergraduate degree. We have a large number of students who already have a well-established career. So we have students that are nurses or paramedics or nurse practitioners or physician assistants or other health professionals in their 30s, 40s, 50s that are taking their medical degree with us. We even have a couple of students who are second and third career students. So we don't have very many students at the top of that age range, but we do have very motivated individuals across a wide age range. that really contributes to the diversity of discussion. So not every student at OUM has a healthcare background. We have individuals who come from engineering and mathematics backgrounds, science backgrounds, English backgrounds, teaching backgrounds. The main thing that unites all OUM students is the common motivation to become a physician and to increase their knowledge base. It's really not an easy path, and I want to commend each and every one of you for taking the initial steps and coming here today. Medicine is not an easy path to start on. It's not an easy path to continue on. It's not an easy path to get off of once you start. But individuals that do really well do so because they're very motivated by this drive to serve others, which is a really noble profession. One other thing that I do want to say about success, and you'll hear me say this a lot, no matter where you're interacting with me, but the most successful students at OUM in the time that I've been here have a good support system in place. So, as you're thinking about your application to OUM, or maybe you're starting in this July cohort, or maybe you've already submitted application materials in advance of the September 1st deadline, think about who in your circle is going to be part of your support system. It's so important that you have other people around you within your support system, and that the people who are closest in your circle around you do support your journey through medical school. It's a very tough time, it's very long hours, and having the support of others makes a huge difference. So just be thinking about that when you are going through this part of your medical student journey, and have those discussions with your support people about what they could be doing to support you and how you can support and be open with them. In addition to the people that are currently in your support system, you have me as your Associate Dean for Student Engagement. We also have regional deans. So there's a regional dean for North America, Dr. Crystal Boone, who supports all students in North America. We have actually 3 student-led programs. We have the Oceania University of Medicine Student Association, which all students across all of the jurisdictions can become members of the OUMSA. They have in-person and virtual events. They do advocacy. They do charity work. There are leadership opportunities. We have a peer support program where there are 6 volunteers. You can see their pictures and names if you go into the program details on the website. So these individuals are peer supporters. They're not trained medical professionals, but they have received some training that enables them to support students through acute or chronic times, whether students are having issues with a particular class, or having issues with adjusting to medical student life, or having some family troubles, or just need someone to listen to them. The peer support program is there to do that, because nobody really understands what it's like to go to medical school, what it's like to go to medical school right now, or what it's like to go to OUM, like individuals that are in the peer support program, because they are current students at OUM. We also have a student ambassador program. So if you're interested in meeting some of our student ambassadors, just let your admissions counselor know, and they can connect you to a student ambassador. You can talk directly to them about their experience at OUM and ask them questions about the program. They often come to our webinars as well. So if you're a regular attendee to webinars, you will have met some of our student ambassadors. We have some new student ambassadors who are just joining the program this month to support our incoming July cohort. So you'll get a chance to meet those in upcoming webinars as well. Or if you're part of the July cohort, you'll meet them in a couple of weeks. That's, I think, all I want to say about student support programs. If you have questions about that, or want to know a little bit more about defined programs like our accommodation, equity, and inclusion programming, if you have some specific needs that you might have individual questions about, just get in touch with me after the webinar, and I can provide some further details about additional supports that we provide to individual students on a case-by-case basis. So I'm going to open it now if you have additional questions to some of the material that I talked about today, and to thank each and every one of you for your time and attention today. Your time is incredibly valuable. It's probably your most valuable resource. So I really want to thank you for taking that step, taking this time for yourself to further explore what it'd be like to pursue that dream that you've probably had burning in your chest for a really long time about becoming a doctor and helping people and being able to save the lives of patients. And I just want to, acknowledge you for doing that and taking the steps along that pathway. So I'll just hold some space for a few moments. If you have questions, you're welcome to raise a hand if you want to take the microphone, or feel free to type your question in the chat window. So Annalisa would like to know, from the previous enrollees, how many have graduated? So we currently have 2 Canadian graduates, and we have 3 Canadian students, and we have 4 Canadian students coming into our July cohort. So we'll have 7 Canadian students. So currently 100% of our Canadian enrollees are on track to graduate, but I can't say for certain because some of them are just starting in. Isn't it nice to just have like a little bit of quiet sometimes? I like holding space for thoughts and questions. If you have questions or comments, or just want to know a little bit more about anything that I've talked about today, or just to hear from a Canadian faculty member like myself, I've put my direct email address on the slide. It's nicolette.mcguire@oum.edu.ws. You can feel free to reach out to me directly. Also, your admissions counselors really have the greatest depth and wealth of knowledge about the OUM program. So they're such wonderful people, whether your admissions counselor is Mary or Angela or Shanda or Regina, or Becky. They're a wonderful team, so do rely on them. If they don't have the answer, they're able to get you in touch with the correct individual. So Angela wants to know, do you have students from Africa? We have students who have Africa as a birth continent, but they're not currently living in Africa. So we don't have the setup really for ensuring that we're allowing for students to meet all of the requirements in the different countries within Africa. So we currently don't serve students who are resident within Africa, but we have students who have Africa as a birth country, or who are recent immigrants from Africa who are living in Australia, New Zealand, Samoa, Canada, or the US that are current students at OUM. And Annalisa wanted to know, from previous years, correct me if I'm wrong, enrollees are 300. So we currently have 319 enrolled students. I can't speak to the number of enrollees each and every year, but our cohorts tend to be around 50 to 60 students per enrolled cohort. And we have 2 cohorts here. So typically we take in about 100 students per year. And then we'll have students leaving as they graduate from the program as well. Okay, so Sylvia wants to know, is there a medium to connect with other students? So what I would advise, if you have questions about the program, if you want to connect with an individual student to ask questions, you can get in touch with one of our student ambassadors, and your admissions counselor can give you the name and contact information of a student ambassador. If you're wanting to know about if there's a medium to connect with other students while you're a student, absolutely. So students do connect when they're in classrooms, because we use Zoom as a classroom. Here in our webinar today, we're not using a chat window, but typically classrooms are really lively and cameras are on, sometimes off. Sometimes people are using the chat window, people are using the microphone and connecting and discussing the content. Students obviously don't just connect in their classrooms. Most of the students form study groups within their cohort because they'll be taking the same classes, and at orientation, everyone gets to meet each other, get each other's contact information, and they begin to form study groups at that point. In terms of social rather than academic activities, our OUM Student Association organizes in-person and virtual events. We also have some of our student leaders do also organize in-person events, and sometimes our regional deans will organize dinners or sites and in-person hospital visits and sites. We do have our Vice Chancellor and our COO will do visits to our various jurisdictions, and students who are in the area are invited to come and chat with each other and to connect with the leadership of OUM as well. So there are good opportunities for lots of in-person interaction if that's your desire. Our students do, not as an official university site, but most of our students are on WhatsApp, and we'll create groups in WhatsApp for example, there's a cardiovascular system WhatsApp group, or there's a clinical rotation WhatsApp group, or a stethoscopes down, which is our monthly clinical student meetup. They'll have WhatsApp group for that. So students tend to create the groups within WhatsApp rather than just on Zoom. So they get very creative in terms of how they meet up. And if you're someone who's incredibly social, perhaps you'll want to be the one as the student that'll be organizing the meetups or organizing the groups in your particular area. So maybe Sylvia, you'll take on that role when you get in. So Annalisa wants to know books, resources, all included with the fees. So OUM uses Clinical Key and Clinical Key Student, which is a virtual library that contains all of the medical textbooks. It contains videos and journal articles and images and all kinds of stuff, but basically all of the textbooks, all of your assigned reading is available in Clinical Key. So you don't need to purchase any additional textbooks. The fee for Clinical Key is included in your tuition and fees, and you don't need to purchase any textbooks outside of those that are recommended in class and already available in Clinical Key. Some students do like to have paper copies of textbooks, and some students do purchase that, but there aren't any classes where you will have to purchase textbooks that are outside of Clinical Key. It's all available to you and part of your existing Clinical Key fee. Annalisa, I can't answer your second question because I'm just not sure what information I haven't already provided that it will speak to. But if you want to email me, we can have a more fulsome conversation so I can ensure that I'm getting at the information that you're looking for, and I can probably give you some more. I can probably look up and give you some more specific numbers. Okay. We are just at 9 o'clock now, so I will let you all get out on time, but I do again want to thank you for your time and attention. It's been my pleasure having a small space with you to talk a little bit about OUM service to Canadian students. If you want to know more, I do encourage you to look in a little bit more detail on our website, or to connect with me directly if you have specific questions about Canada, or with your admissions counselor to have all of your questions fully answered. So I hope you'll join me at our next monthly webinar, and you can get some further details on that from guess who? Your admissions counselor. So thanks again so much for your time and attention, and I look forward to seeing you all again soon. Bye for now.